Welcome to Unsilent with your hosts Dave and Brian. This is not another current events podcast. We're digging deeper, diagnosing, and discussing what's really going on today, how we got here, and providing observations for future generations.
Hey, welcome to Unsilent. We're Brian and Dave. We'd love to hear where you think we got it right and where you think we got it wrong. You can do that by visiting unsilentpodcast.com, commenting on the Rumble channel that we got there, or pretty much any social media channel. Just tag us and we'll respond back to you and tell you why we're right. So, more than happy to do that. It's just another service we provide here at Unsilent.
That's right. Among the many benevolent things we do, that's just one more.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So, a big week in foreign affairs, I'd say.
Yeah, I would say so. For those listening, the purpose of this podcast that Dave and I do is to try to explain to future generations what it's like to live in this moment and talk about all the things that are not likely to be in whatever their version of a history book is in 70 years. I suspect this will be in the history books, whether it's a footnote or a big story, who knows? So this might be a little bit different. So I don't know that we need to. Again, we don't need to cover things that are going to be documented and that kind of stuff. So for guys like me who are not Middle East political scholars, I mean, the news is there's peace between Israel and Gaza, which is presumably Israel and Palestine. And going back to who was the guy that was a Palestinian leader in the 80s? Who was the guy that had Yasser Arafat? Okay, so going back to when he was on CBS News once in a while, before the days of CNN and all that kind of stuff or whatever. As a kid or a young adult, I would hear about the Israel-Palestine conflict. There'd be eras where there was peace and the eras where there weren't. So for a guy like me, Dave, who doesn't understand the gravity or the implications of this, what does this mean? Why is this any different than any of the other eras of peace? What's unique? What's different? Give me a synopsis that is relevant to our time, what is different than what Kenny G would read about a book 70 years from now.
Well, so the biggest difference now versus all of the other, initiatives and movements and stuff that have occurred, since the Israeli state was formed in 1948 is really the fact that there are so many Arab governments that are on board with, if not fully embracing Israel, making peace with Israel, and not calling for their genocide and for their complete destruction. So for the majority of the history of the conflict, it's been, all of the various Arab states, and there's probably about I don't know, maybe a billion Arabs in the world, something like that. And they've been, unhappy with they were unhappy from the day that the Israeli state was formed in 1948 until now. There's in Jerusalem has always been a contested city. It's the holiest city, or one of the holiest cities in Islam, and it's also a holy city for the Jews. It's for all Abrahamic religions, for Christians. So much of the Bible takes place in Jerusalem. Yeah. Jesus walked the streets. All of that, and so all of that region, that little tiny itty bitty strip of land there in Israel, and the tiny little itty bitty strip of land, what they call the Gaza Strip, literally that whole area has been in conflict for time immemorial. And so, but it's always been, in the past, it's been the Arabs versus the Israelis. Now, we've talked in other podcasts about some of that ancient conflict between, the two children of Jacob, and Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We talked about all that, and you could point back to all that's been going on there, but. In this case, you've got places. So Egypt just hosted the peace talks. Now, Egypt in times past was hostile and part of the one of the Arab nations that invaded Israel and went to war with Israel. There was I'm not going to go to the history of the '67 war and all the others, but there's Israel, there's Egypt. Qatar was involved in negotiating this peace this time around, probably because they realized that the fact that they're in another country and Israel could reach into that country and kill people, brought them a little bit closer to the table. You've got, the Saudis, the new generation of Saudis under Mohammed bin Salman. He's the younger generation. They would rather not have all of this, conflict and all that. They want to become a modern society. They're a big video gaming society. There's lots of things happening in Saudi Arabia that are very cool. So there's lots of countries. Jordan has been, relatively, the Arab states have had to kind of watch themselves in terms of how close they allow themselves to get to Israel and how close they have been perceived by their street, by the average person on the street, the blue collar, shall we say, Arab worker, because if they figure they're too close, then they're going to have political ramifications at home. So, but now we're to the point where enough nations, enough of, we had the Abraham Accords during Trump's first term, and Trump is the wild card and the thread through this whole modern, experience with Arab-Israeli conflict. And so, he did the Abraham Accords, which, lessened tensions in the region. And in fact, for just recent history, I think one of the most important things to understand is the whole October 7th, massacre that took place with the Gazans attacking was probably in response to the Abraham Accords.
Yeah. And I would just, let's just pause there for a second, because I think the October 7th massacre would be something that would just be a footnote in history.
Yeah.
But in the moment, it felt like a pretty damn big deal. Right?
Huge.
So I don't know that would be represented in the history books later on about,
right.
I think you and I I'm sure we talked about it, but and I use the word jarring a lot for some of the things that are going on, but it was jarring to see young women being like dragged alive and dead, in their body contorted in various ways that, we just don't see that kind of thing. Now, maybe other parts of the world, like, okay, that's just a Thursday afternoon, that's no big deal. But for us, at least for me, we just don't see stuff like that. So it was jarring for us to see glimpses of that are really outside of our norm.
Yeah.
Also, there was like, how could this happen? Like that conversation, there was, thousands of variations of that conversation. Like, how could this happen? Why would somebody hate somebody so much to do such a thing? Which goes back to you and I, like, there's only two stories in human history, so, but I think that was a big deal that kind of, in my view, again, my understanding of all this stuff is very minute, very limited. But there was always kind of this crowd, it feels like, that was pro-Palestinian, and always kind of the crowd that was pro-Israel.
Yeah.
The pro-Palestinian crowd for the last, let's say, 25 years, or up to that moment, the previous 20 years, I would say it's probably louder. I would say the pro-Israel crowd was more powerful, like in DC and things like that, sure. Right? But the average person was kind of indifferent. That day changed that indifference for the people who were like more inclined to be like, I don't understand a whole lot of it, but you see that kind of violence for young, defenseless children, kids, 20-something-year-old kids, oftentimes female, enjoying a concert. I think it kind of felt to me like it ripped a Band-Aid off, or it did something to kind of heighten the emotional entanglement we had to that region, if that makes any sense.
Sure. Yeah, it does. And it was, I mean, for people that were paying attention then, and who saw the images and who heard the stories that are just, I mean, I almost don't want to repeat them because they're so demonically, monstrously horrible. It's like, it was like, how is this even possible that a human being could do this to a pregnant mother or whatever? It was, I mean, it was a true on the part of the Palestinians, backed by the Iranians, because I don't think there's anybody that believes that it wasn't greenlit or in some way, at least tacitly nodded towards Iran. It was the last hope of keeping, well, not the last hope, but one of the last big hopes of destroying the Abraham Accords. I mean, really, if you boil it down politically, what was happening geopolitically? I mean, they sent people on hang gliders in to just completely, annihilate people, knowing that Israel was going to respond. I mean, what sane country, when you're invaded like that and had, the per capita number of Israelis that were killed in that was just, if you compare that to the per capita percentages in the United States or any other country, it makes 9/11 look small in comparison. I mean, tiny in comparison. Per capita wise. So, I mean, the intention was obviously to drive division between the West and the Arab Street. I mean, that was the entire point of that, because the Abraham Accords were having such success. Now, the problem, of course, if the Abraham Accords, so if somebody says, well, why is that a problem if the Abraham Accords are not successful? Well, it's a problem because the hardline Islamists believe that the Jews cannot be in the Holy Land at all. From the river to the sea means from basically the entire river out to the Mediterranean Sea. There's nary one Jew. I mean, that's right. And that narrative vanishes if Egypt and Saudi Arabia in particular, if Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, just name all the nations, if they're
UAE,
at peace, UAE, if they're trading with Israel, but like I said earlier, a lot of these countries want to be involved with Israel because they love Jews. No, it has nothing to do with them loving Jews. But there is absolutely no question that Israel is an incredible society. It's very tiny. It's an engineering and science society of world importance. I mean, we get a lot of our weapons designs from the Israelis. I mean, as an example, or medicine, we get a lot of medical innovations coming from the Israelis. And so that's not lost on their neighbors. Like, well, these guys are super successful. Maybe instead of killing our successful neighbors, maybe we should see if we can benefit from them. How about that for a change?
And I don't know the geopolitical stuff nearly as well as you do. I also don't think I understand the economics of that region nearly as well as you do. But it would appear to me that with the advent of electric cars, for example, that we're nowhere near it today.
Right.
But down the road, you can, like, the likelihood or even certainty that we will no longer be 100% dependent on oil is now, like, it's the reality that wasn't a reality 40 years ago. Right. It was a dream for some. It was like, someday, but we can't even see that far out. So even if it's going to happen, my kids and my grandkids are never going to see that world. So who cares? Right. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think that most of us kind of recognize that whether it's electric cars as we have them today or whatever the iteration is going to be, it's not in the unforeseeable future where oil will not drive transportation. Right. So I got to believe that I'm not the only dope in the world who's figured this out. If I figured it out, I got to believe the guys who are sitting on trillions of dollars of oil probably also had come to some kind of similar conclusion and be like, hey, maybe it would make sense for us to find some other source of income. I'm going to guess they've grown accustomed to the lifestyle that they have.
You betcha. Well,
over the last 100 years or whatever.
That is, there's been a published plan. I can't remember. It's called like Kingdom 2030 or something. It's so again, Mohammed bin Salman is the prince who basically runs Saudi Arabia right now, and he is going to be he's the crown prince right now. He's going to be the dude. He's going to be the top guy. And they've had in place for many years a published written plan. You can look it up on one of the Kingdom websites about becoming a superpower of something other than oil. I mentioned earlier, a lot of people don't know this, but Saudi Arabia, as an example, is one of the world's leading economic powers and developers of video games. Video games are, people think, well, the movie industry is powerful. Movie industry is nothing. Video games dwarfs the movie industry. So they just recently, in fact, I think Saudi Arabia has, and I'll if I get too far in the weeds, just tell me to shut up. But Saudi Arabia has a sovereign wealth fund where a lot of their money from oil goes into. Now they've been investing that in Apple. They've been investing that just recently in Electronic Arts, one of the world's largest video. A lot of the biggest video game labs are in Saudi Arabia.
Interesting.
A lot of the investment in video games. So they have a written, published, well-documented plan that says, hey, we know that oil is a short-term thing. We got to take the money we're making from this oil right now. We have to get our people trained in Western things while they want to preserve their Islamic heritage. So they're not saying we're all going to become Christians and go to church. So they're going to preserve what they've got. And at the same time, they are investing in high-tech stuff all over the place. So this is a threat. The other linchpin that has to be remembered here, this is a threat to the Persians, aka Iran, who all they got right now, I mean, they've got a super young population, but all they've got is oil. And so the Saudis and the Iranians are in this tug of war back and forth with each other. And so therefore, if a high-tech society like Israel can be prevented from having a great relationship with Saudi Arabia, that's a super big threat to.
And I got to imagine Iran and their statespeople, their leaders, their average Joe, probably not on the same page as Saudi Arabia on the let's do gaming for fun. They're much more traditionalist, conservative, that kind of thing, right? When I say conservative, I don't mean like our left and right. I mean conservative to Islamic traditions and things like that. So they've been kind of the ones holding things back, and they had a lot of the power and influence. And as their influence is waning, the people who don't want to be held back are marching forward, kind of with or without them, kind of a thing. Is that a fair way to say it?
Exactly. They are not friendly with the West. Saudi Arabia is friendly with the West. There's your dividing line. There's why Trump is so successful.
Right. So I've been listening off and on for the last few months to this podcast. It's like a 30-hour series that Daryl Cooper did. He's a historian. Maybe he's not an actual historian, but he does historical episodes on his podcast. He has like this 30-hour series on the Israel-Palestine thing. And so he starts the story back in like pre-World War I. Okay. And something that I'm only a few hours into it, so I don't have, I'm nowhere near like modern times, but something that it just was shocking as he was talking about it. And then it's like, okay, well, of course it's how it is. We tend to look at big periods of time, like hundreds of years or a couple thousand years, and like, okay, well, this is the way it always was. Well, that's not really how it is. There's lots of micro ebbs and flows in there, right? Sure. So going back to pre-World War I, the way he describes it, the Jews and the Arabs the fight wasn't there at all. Now, historically, I get, there's the Jewish people, the Christian people, and the Muslim people, and like they're all kind of at each other kind of off and on. I get that part. But for that specific era, it was really the Christians and Jews that were really fighting, and the Arabs were kind of indifferent a bit. Yeah. The Arabs didn't mind the Jews even coming to what is now Israel, but the plan wasn't for it to become the state of Israel like it is now. It was presented in a different way, whatever. But my point is, in the early 1900s, the conflict was between the Christians and the Jews. The Christians were persecuting the Jews, like going into villages, like October 7th, but it was Christians doing it to Jews, right? Sure. Okay. They were looking for a place to flee. They end up like deciding they're going to go to what is now Israel. My point is, if I'm that, what's the crown prince's name?
Mohammed bin Salman.
Okay, so bin
Salman.
So
everybody calls him MBS.
MBS. Okay, so if I'm MBS, I probably have a grandfather, a grandmother, a great uncle, somebody who can tell me about a time where there wasn't conflict with Arabs and Jews.
Sure.
Right. And so now maybe they're saying, maybe they're complaining about it. Maybe they're saying, back then we didn't hate him enough. I don't know. I'm not in the room, obviously.
Sure.
But my point is, we look at these things and kind of cartoon, make caricatures out of them and generalize things like, well, this is how it always. Well, actually, 120 years ago, there wasn't this conflict.
Right.
He, no doubt, a guy with that kind of education and understanding of their culture that I'm sure MBS has, understands that it wasn't always this way, and it doesn't necessarily have to be this way.
Exactly.
And if he's looking at a strictly dollars and cents kind of a thing, okay, we're giving up money by sticking to this hardline kind of a thing. And second, the cost we are paying in training troops, in munitions, in whatever, there's expenses there that maybe aren't necessary. So we're losing on both ends. We're losing because we're spending less money we don't necessarily have to, and we're losing opportunities and other things we could be investing in getting returns on.
Exactly.
Like if you're a young guy who's like not a hardcore traditionalist conservative, what's in it for you to go along with that, right?
Yeah, well, exactly. And I mean, from his perspective, if you overlay a couple of things you overlay on that, one of the things you overlay on that is the fact that they do know that oil's been very, very good to them. Oil's been very, very good to the House of Saud, right?
Yeah.
But he realizes that it's going to be over now. You could either just go down fighting, and you could fight the West. I mean, it's a losing proposition to fight the West because one, there's a huge market here, right? I mean, we've got there's like a bill between you add up all the people in Western cultures, and you're probably close to 1 billion people or so, and you're sitting in Saudi Arabia, and it's like, we can either keep fighting these people who, by the way, and there's this Western culture right next door to us in, relatively speaking, in Israel, who's doing some really interesting things. How long is that going to be a good proposition for us? It's not going to be a good proposition long term. It's not going to be a good proposition for them versus China. I mean, so they need to take. So it's a brilliant, like you say, it's a brilliant business move for the Saudis and the Qataris, and you take whatever group's got money to make the decision to not abandon their religion. I mean, but adopt capitalism and adopt some Western types of things that can power them into the future. It's just it makes perfect sense.
And also, not having any knowledge of those cultures, like so minimal understanding of like how those cultures work and what makes them go, and like what motivates the average person to get out of bed every day and like go do things. I don't even understand that, right? So, but I got to think that you look at a 50-year period like we've had from the 70s to now, what that region has looked like compared to other parts of the world. It's got to be just emotionally draining. It's got to be just it's got to just take a psychological toll that I got to imagine at some point, if you're Caesar, if you're whoever, you kind of go, is it really worth it?
Well, and the other thing that really reinforces that point, I think, Brian, is you look at your next door neighbor, Israel, and I don't know if you've seen pictures of Tel Aviv or of Haifa, of any of the cities in Israel, and they are modern marvels. They're modern wonders. They're successful. They got great roads. I mean, they're not perfect. It's not a perfect culture by any stretch. There isn't such a thing, but they are incredibly successful. A tiny little bit of them, and they're incredibly successful. And they have resisted attempt after attempt after attempt of much larger groups of people, multiple nations, to destroy them. And so if you're looking at your worldview and says your worldview says we are the dominant, we're going to be, Allah's will is for us to dominate planet Earth, for there to be global caliphate, the 12th Imam is going to come back, the Mahdi, and subjugate everybody. But then you're looking next door and like, these guys are successful and we can't hardly get enough food to eat. And that is a complete contradiction of your worldview. So, you either have two choices. It's like, well, maybe we should modify our worldview, or maybe, which is what, Saudi Arabia and some of these other countries are doing. Or it's like, no, they're an aberration. They've only gotten there, and this is where the Jewish conspiracy theories come in. They've only gotten there because they're stealing from.
They're cheating. They're
clever Jews. All that.
Yeah, kind of but you can also look at UAE. I mean, Dubai. I mean, I saw something. Was a young lady from, I don't know, she's like 28 or something like that, from Europe.
Yep.
Went to Dubai. Was just talking about like the price of a soda. It's like $50.
Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. And
you don't even have to look to a Jewish culture. You can look at another Arab culture and be like, wait a second, like maybe we're missing the boat here.
Yeah, exactly. Now that requires a person to take a little bit of a dispassionate view of things. And the challenge that a lot of the more extreme Islamic cultures have had is that in madrasas, in their schools and such, they've been trained from their version of Saturday morning cartoons has cartoon characters killing Jews. I mean, so it's been a tough road to make that sort of cultural shift.
Okay, so we've had this big shift over there where, so what are the I don't know, again, the detail, I don't want to get the details of the deal, so to speak, but what was accomplished? Like, just give me a quick 30-second or 2-minute, what was just accomplished?
Well, so I mean, we won't go through all 20 points, but there was a 20-point plan. Starts with releasing the hostages, and then so 20 of them would come back. There's 28 bodies and remains and such that are supposed to come back. There is a component for demilitarization for Hamas giving up their weapons. There's a component for an international body governing Gaza, rebuilding Gaza. Tony Blair's involved. Trump family, etc. So there's a plan in place that we're one step down the road on that plan right now to sort of revitalize the area. The broader plan, again, is one in which the Abraham Accords will organically and naturally expand. So one of the most interesting things that happened this last week, which is critical and probably will be lost in history, is that when they had the Hamas and the Qataris and President Trump and the cabinet and the various people meeting in Egypt, they invited Benjamin Netanyahu. They invited the Israeli prime minister to Egypt. Now, it cannot be overstated how huge that is in terms of the fact that al-Sisi, the person who runs Egypt, felt comfortable enough to invite the Jewish prime minister to come to Egypt is monstrously huge. Now, he probably knew that he was
meaning like he wasn't fearing a revolt in the streets, kind of a thing.
He wasn't fearing a revolt in the streets. He wasn't. And now Netanyahu it's their high holy days, and feast days, etc., the fall feast days in the Bible. So Netanyahu didn't go ostensibly for that reason, but the fact that but it didn't even matter. It wasn't important. What was important was
you could argue that a clever politician, they would have gotten together and said, listen, we want to send the message. It would have been okay, but we don't want to actually put you in a situation where this has to happen. So you might almost time this stuff around that kind of thing where you have plausible deniability not to go.
100%.
The message was sent. Yeah,
and I think, I mean, honestly, what you just said is, I think, probably what happened. I think that's probably what happened. It would have been more.
I gotta think they could have had the meeting 7 days later, or 12 days later, or 3 days earlier, if they wanted to.
But it was also a safe way to do it. It's like they invited the Jew, they invited the head Jew, the head Zionist.
You got to do this stuff in incremental, tolerable, bite-sized chunks if you don't want to revolt in the street. No, that makes perfect sense. Right. And I know nothing about this, but that's an obvious okay. Well, if you want to thread the needle on this, that was a great way to do it.
Exactly. And so you have, I think now you have an inexorable move towards a peaceful Middle East. And you asked the question earlier. So we had, it was the late 70s, early 80s, the Oslo Accords, and there's been peace prizes handed out like candy around Middle Eastern peace process for my entire lifetime, it seems like. But nothing has really ever happened that stuck. The difference this time is it looks very likely that it will stick. Now, that does not mean that day after tomorrow it's sunshine and roses and everybody's hopping down the streets of Gaza.
Well, as you and I are talking, less than 24 hours ago, fighting broke out between Pakistan and Afghanistan, something like that. So,
and as we're talking, also there are now Hamas is fighting various family clans for control of Gaza in Gaza. So it's going to be a bloody, there's going to be bloody fits and starts in this whole thing as time goes on. But I'm always a glass half full kind of guy. It's it feels to me like this. Well, there's no question. This is the best chance for Middle Eastern peace that's existed in my lifetime. And it feels very, if not inevitable. Now, there's always exigent circumstances that come up. Maybe Iran hit a bomb someplace. Who knows?
Right.
But there's never been a possibility like this before. I think most people who are smart and analyze the Middle East would have known and did know that the Oslo Accords, Yasser Arafat was never a good faith bargainer. The Fatah, you take all the groups, and most people had resigned themselves to perpetual war in the Middle East, perpetual conflict between the Israelis, or Arabs call them the Zionists, and the Israelis. But this time it feels different in a whole bunch of ways, and it's because it looks like it could be something much more lasting.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I noticed. I can't help but notice an eerie silence from some people. So, bringing it more stateside. Would it be fair to say the squad and their ilk have been very vocal about free Palestine for, like, I don't know, several years now?
Forever,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. This, as you just described it, the best chance for peace in my lifetime, and you're 83 years old or whatever you are, right?
Yeah,
so this is a meaningful period of time Dave's been alive, and this is the best chance for peace, like true legit peace in that region that you can recall.
Yes.
There is not a single celebratory social media post or statement, even a half-ass, like we send it through the New York Times. We have our third level down flunky write some blurb that, like, we just send off to CBS News. Like, not even that. From the ilks of Ilhan Omar, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Jayapal, like this whole crew, who, like, this has been, I don't know, one of their top 3 to 5 chanting points. And by the way, real quick, I just want to reiterate this. If you ever see me in a group chanting, Dave, I like just one bullet to the back of the head. I don't want to see it coming. I just you'll know my life, like, it's over for me,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
And now actually I want to add political singing, like taking the words of Puff the Magic Dragon and changing it around to some anti-Trump song or anti-whatever. Like,
Right.
if you ever see me doing that, just put me out of my misery. Okay.
Gotcha.
So these people who have been, like, chanting about this stuff, like, what are their top 3 to 5 chanting points and singing points and talking points, and their highlighted reels on TikTok and the news and whatever. Crickets from them.
Yeah.
Since this thing happened. Now, either like, see, this feels pretty binary to me.
Yeah.
Or maybe not. Maybe they haven't heard. So I guess we can throw that out there as maybe they haven't heard the news, and they just haven't had a chance to respond because they didn't hear about it.
Okay.
Or they so it seems like either they really didn't care about this topic that much, because if you cared, like, you would be celebrating, you'd be, like, over the moon celebrating, right? Or it was just an in vogue talking point that you thought you could rely on forever to keep you in the public eye.
Well, or there's a third possibility too. I mean, if you pay attention to some of the things like Ilhan Omar as a good example of this, good in quotes, in air quotes, you could have honestly wanted, but not been able to say straight up out loud that, yeah, you think the Jews are the problem. You could be a strict adherent of Jewish conspiracy theories, and you want them to be, from the river to the sea and all that kind of, racist, genocidal garbage. But yes, you're right. If the true, they were saying the word of the day was genocide. Stop the genocide. Well, there's a ceasefire in place. Bombs are falling in Gaza. Bombs are not falling there. The bullets that are being exchanged there are from one Palestinian clan to another Palestinian clan. So the genocide, quote unquote, it never was a genocide. That's a stupid thing, but it stopped. So at a minimum, if your thing was stop the slaughter of the innocents in Gaza, it stopped. It stopped. So why? But did I miss it, Brian? Wasn't there scheduled a parade on Columbia campus to celebrate the end of the? Didn't that? No, not maybe.
I don't recall anything in the news about. Now, again, I'm not on the Columbia University of Columbia's newsletter for sure. So I might have missed it. That's certainly possible.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're a political strategist, Dave, like, even if it goes against every fiber of your being, you hate Donald Trump with an absolute fiery passion. Let's say you absolutely do think, like, you could never say this publicly, but let's say you're some weirdo who actually does think, like, the Jews are the problem, and, like, they all the from the river to like all that stuff. isn't it still politically expedient to like say like, nice job on this one, and then on to the
Right.
next thing? Like,
Yeah. Well, look at the guy. Look at the guy that I admire on this, and I can't believe I'm saying this. I cannot believe John Fetterman. He's the
yeah,
voice. He's the voice of reason. Well, I'm not going to say that. I was going to say maybe some other people should have medical conditions that would bring them to their senses. I don't know, but John Fetterman is the voice of reason in all this, and he's a hardcore lefty. But he's
yeah,
like he thinks the Democrats are dumb for
yeah,
the positioning they're taking on this, and he's 100% right.
yeah. Barack Obama, no comment. Hillary and Bill Clinton did make a comment. That was pretty
And so did
surprising.
Biden. Did you see Biden's comment?
I did not.
I mean, he had to. Well, Biden's person wrote the comment.
Okay, the comment I heard that came from the Biden camp was he looks really young. I know he's not that young, really tall, skinny kid. He looks really young. He said that I'm glad Trump was basically able to do it. We laid the groundwork for this. I'm glad he was able to see it through, kind of a thing.
That's kind of what the Joe Biden statement says. He said something to the effect of, and I don't know, verbatim, but it was something to the effect of, I worked on this tirelessly during my presidency. I'm glad that President Trump could bring this to fruition. So I mean, he got his. But from my perspective, I posted on social media, "Well done, President Biden." I mean,
that's fine.
Good, yeah, it's totally fine.
It would have been a little more magnanimous and a little more less self-righteous to say this, like, high five on this one, great job. I think you suck at everything else, but you nailed this one, and like move on with your life.
But in this day and age, though, with the political polarization that we've got, that statement from Biden, I'll take what I can get.
Yeah. I guess I'm partly happy and partly frustrated with myself that you're right about the third option. If you legitimately hate a group of people because of their religion or whatever, then I guess there is a third plausible reason why you would not. I'm kind of happy I didn't see that, but I'm also kind of disappointed in my skills of deduction that I completely missed that. But you're 100% right. If you legitimately hate these people, then you got to be like somewhat bent that they're not having rockets and bullets hurled at them now, and that would be enough to keep you from celebrating, I guess.
Well, and I think it's important, of all the conspiracy theories I've seen gazillion conspiracy theories in my day. Of all the conspiracy theories that have traction and purchase for centuries, it is the evil Jews conspiracy theory. I mean, it's
certainly the longest living of all of them.
Longest one. Yeah, I mean, going back from the bankers in, what was it, Genoa or wherever it was, when they kicked out all the Jews from Italy or from something like that.
Yeah. So, I guess the reason I bring it, it's funny to bring it up because I think that these people are either legitimately, again, going back to Adam Carolla saying stupid or liar, right? They're either just not that bright or they're just completely full of crap all the time. And whenever they say things, it's, and it does feel like pretty binary. But I guess if you could throw in there, like, if you just flat out hate a group of people bad enough, that would weigh in too. But, these are people who have momentum. Some, like, it's diminishing. You're not even talking about it's diminishing, but these guys are the ones, like, they're the torchbearers now.
Yeah.
And it kind of illustrates to me, like, just kind of where we are. There's these factions of people who can't even if you don't want to celebrate, acknowledge. Let's just acknowledge, like, hey, this thing happened and I'm glad it happened. Even if you're lying through your teeth, I don't know, politicians have a tendency of lying through their teeth. So why would this one be hard is just it's a real stumper for me, because it just feels like it's such an easy layup just to, like, great, I hate everything about you. Great job on this one. Moving on.
Well, I mean, their only cover, though, is silence. I mean, the bottom line is their only cover for everything they've been saying. So, people have been talking about the college campus insanity now for a few years, where there's been Hitlerian statements, all over campus. Hitler didn't go far enough, and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And if you're one of the people that has said, well, that's a free speech issue and there's genocide in Gaza and all of this kind of stuff, you've literally painted yourself into a corner. You have no way.
That's what I'm getting at. Like, what is the political move from here? I guess that's kind of like okay, it's icky what they're doing, and like I think less of them than I did even a week ago, which is kind of tough to do for some of these folks.
Yeah.
By the way, there's people in the Republican Party I feel that way about too.
Sure,
like I really don't think a lot of them as people.
You bet.
But like, where do you go from here? Like, what's the maneuver from here? What's your talking point going to be now to keep you on CNN at night?
Right.
And how do you face people not done the easy thing, even if it was disingenuous? I just don't understand that.
Well, I mean, it's going to be hard because the thing about the bombing of Gaza and all of that was that it gave them rage as their political tool.
Yeah.
And now, what else is there in the world that's so easy? So that one was a super easy one for them because you can have rage. The Palestinian kids are dying in the streets. We got 58,000. Blah blah blah. All this stuff. You've got all this stuff happening, and you've got a simple, compact, easy to digest group, the Jews in Israel, as your target. Yeah. I mean, that's just wrapped up in a bow, and here's a political issue for you.
And if you want to make it even sweeter, the likelihood this thing would just keep going on forever is pretty high.
Oh, it was
you could reliably count on this being a talking point for 73 years if you were a politician.
100%. I mean, every U.S. president has wanted to solve this, have the pin in his cap, get the Nobel Peace Prize and all that. So yes, absolutely. This was reliably a great issue for whatever side you were going to be on. The only issue or the only side, the only thing now is basically Trump essentially broke the whole thing. He just broke the entire political model. And assuming that it holds, and like I said, I have I'd give it better than average odds that it holds. This changes the entire complexion of foreign policy.
Yeah, I would agree. Again, it could all fall apart. It may have already fallen apart as you and I are recording right now, and I wouldn't know, and it wouldn't be shocking if that were to happen. I do think I give this a better than average or greater chance of success than failure.
Yeah.
But again, because for cynical reasons, which is, I believe the people who are making the decisions to support this are doing it for very selfish reasons that are good selfish reasons. Like the motivations to do something like this outweigh the motivations to not do it, which are, money, power, influence, like all the usual human things. Right.
Right.
So you mentioned Hitler, which of course I immediately thought of Donald Trump because that's who
Hitler.
Right? If you're a Democratic strategist, how do you keep pinning the term Hitler and fascist on him? Now, okay. And what I mean is, you have the Ukraine thing is still going on, and that, like, Trump said he would end on day one. Obviously, that hasn't happened. Right. I do kind of laugh when people are like, he said he was in on day one, and then he hasn't. Well, okay, name a politician that didn't lie about something they were going to do on the first day of office. Like 100% of them have done that. Like, said they were going to do a thing, and it didn't happen somewhere along the way because they say they're going to do 1,000 things, and so maybe only 842 of them going to happen. Something's going to fall off the plate, or maybe none of them happened with some politicians, right?
Right.
So, okay, I get that. He said he would do that, and he did. But you could look at a couple of these conflicts and go, okay, that was easy. The one that was at Congo or something like that, somewhere in like that one. Like, okay, that's a layup. Maybe it's like, okay, we're gonna buy something from somewhere else if you don't fix this, and they just like snap to. Maybe it was just like a quick thing. Yeah. And then some of these other conflicts you could look at, okay, maybe those were fairly easy, whatever. But I don't think you can string together a number like 8 and have it all be luck. And I don't think a guy who does this can be Hitler. So, like, how do you steer out of this, Dave?
I mean, they are. I'm sure right now in the halls of the high halls of leftism, they're looking for something that can engender the rage, because really their entire program, their entire philosophy, we've talked about it before, is based on the oppressed oppressor, dynamic. It's based on the, colonialist dynamic. It's based on finding, some way to say that the West is evil. And the problem is that they'll find things and they'll say things. It's like, okay, well, you're kicking kids to the street with your government shutdown. Never mind that the Republicans have tried to open it up like 13 times now, and the Democrats keep saying no. But whatever it is, the problem that they've got, the real problem they have, and I don't think there's a solution to it for them at this point, is you've got low level, anger about some of this stuff. Portland, oh well, they're sending in troops to Portland. Okay, well, maybe I don't like, but I'm going to go to see what's happening with the Mariners. I think that they're going to have a hard time finding an outrage to fill the rage bucket that has now been essentially emptied.
Yeah, they got Chicken Little syndrome, right?
Yeah.
And I would also, like you said a minute ago, like everything has been through the lens of the oppressed and oppressor. I would argue that over the last certainly 5 years, I don't think I know that 2015 through 2020, there was a lot of anti-Trump stuff.
Yeah.
But especially the last 3 to 5 years, I would argue that the hatred for Donald Trump has supplanted the oppressor-oppression lens as being the primary thing, right? That like he is the problem more so than American colonialism is the problem. So if you put all your eggs in this basket, that he's the problem, and he's doing things repeatedly that are working. I mean, how do you argue that's not working? Now, again, I'm not saying I love the guy. I'm not saying I want to hang out with him. He might be screwing up a whole bunch of other stuff, but the things that are on the world stage, he's nailing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the left loves Trump, and they love him because he's an easy figure to hate. I mean, it's just like the Palestinian-Israeli conflict was succinct. I mean, politicians love something that works for sound bites. So, Trump, Hitler, that's a great soundbite. It works as a soundbite. So, the underlying philosophy of colonialism and oppressor and all that still very much operative, but it was very easy to just encapsulate it in Orange Man Bad, and so as a result of that, if you can say, if a lot of people are saying, well, maybe Orange Man Bad, you've seen all those memes. Trump is the biggest failure in history at Hitlering.
He's the worst. He's the worst Nazi ever, because not very many Nazis solved like significant world conflicts.
Yeah, and not many Nazis have gotten a standing ovation in the Knesset in Israel. So it's not.
And then went across the Gulf or whatever to an Arab country and got the same treatment. Like that's
exactly. And so they Trump was a lot easier of a target a week ago, 2 weeks ago, a year ago, 5 years ago. He was a much easier target, much easier to encapsulate into a soundbite that can lead to evening news on ABC World News Tonight, than he is today. And so that gives them a serious problem.
Yeah. All right. Well, something a little more lighthearted, at least from my perspective. Letitia James. So she is one of a I don't know if I'd say long list, but there's been notable politicians and attorneys general and governors and mayors who have come to power saying that they were gonna squash a particular type of crime, or a particular. I think even in Chicago in the 1920s, I think a mayor came to power saying he was going to take care of the Al Capone problem, if I remember right. I could be wrong on that, but like this is not a novel strategy, right? So, but what's interesting is depending on which lawyer you listen to, and again, I don't want to get into the legalities of things I don't understand, but they basically, like, some would argue they stretch the law to make the charges against Trump in New York City fit a fairly untested approach to that law, right? Now, it might have been completely reasonable. I think Trump also said he was going to pull out a law written in the 1700s that had never one time been used. And like this stuff happens. I get it. I'm not spun out on that. But at a minimum, they went after him for these things that it was going to be a tough case to prove. All right, even in a very favorable jury pool. But now the Attorney General of New York is like accused of the same crime, but in a much more normative way of a much more normative violation, I guess that was how I would say it, right?
Yes.
like these people can't stop stubbing their toe, man. They just can't stop like doing these bonehead things. And again, the reason I care is because I like the idea of having opposing ideas when we are putting our best ideas forward and like selecting the best idea and doing, debate. I think
Yes.
I'm all for that. I don't
Right.
want a uniparty of Republicans anymore than I want a uniparty of Democrats. I don't
Right.
want either one of those.
Right.
I want these guys to be successful. And by the way, it wasn't that many years ago. I voted Democrat fairly regularly,
Sure.
They just keep is it just blind hatred? They just can't see anything else except for this. They just keep stubbing their toe, or they just have a talent pool that's not very good, like, or the donors are so fixated on what they want that it is so outside of the norms. They just have to keep stretching. Like, why do they keep stepping on their toes here, Dave?
Well, I think it's because what they've done for years worked so well. In other words, the little soundbite cycle, the little news cycle worked for them so very well. You can say, blue is green on a Tuesday, and then say blue is yellow on a Thursday, and nobody remembers the previous one. So social media wasn't so powerful. There wasn't the right wasn't so active. It's like, I'm not getting involved in all this stuff. So
Yeah.
And so it worked very well for them. I think the norms, the rules of the game, where Letitia James could say, I'm running for office to get Donald Trump on legal stuff because he's defrauding, and then she goes ahead and defrauds and gets in trouble. That under 7, 8 years ago, 5 years ago, wouldn't have been a problem. But now it's a problem because the rules have changed. So, I mean, it's also true, I think, that you would think if you're her, that you're not going to do a deal that is going to be at all possible. I mean, she gained a little bit from doing the kind of deal she did, but you're not.
She saved $300 a month in interest. I mean,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, she gained a little bit, nothing of any substance, and she's spending a whole lot more on lawyers
I've
now.
seen a picture of the house. It ain't that nice.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a moderate to below average rental. It's not
and you see now she is the person that is living there, like her niece or some convicted felon, and
not paying rent.
So I mean, I think the reason is because this it would have worked before. It would have worked 5 years ago. It doesn't.
What you're saying is they're not doing anything different, just between a more politically active opponent, a more tuned in populist, and I guess I would argue the rise of independent journalism, like supplanting perhaps traditional, CBS News, kind of New York Times kind of stuff. As I think those people have really done themselves the disservice they did themselves in the credibility they lost in doing things that were exposed as being kind of boneheaded, that's cost them. And now, that makes sense.
I think that's the core of it.
Yeah. All right. Well, interesting times to say the least.
Yes, indeed.
I mean, I'm certainly hopeful that this peace things does stick. I mean, sincerely, that would be fantastic. And again, Kenny G's gonna know a lot more about this than you and I do, for sure.
Yeah,
but
absolutely,
it seems like the motivations are lining up where it would make sense for it to have a legitimate chance, at least from my dim view. Anyhow, all right. Well, as Dave mentioned in the beginning, if there's things we've said that you think are especially on point or especially wrong, we'd love to hear about that. You can do that at unsilentpodcast.com. Rumble has a great comment section. And until next week, this is Dave and Brian signing off.
See you next week.
Do you want to be unsilent? Make your voice heard on our social media channels and share where you think we got it right or wrong. Go to unsilentpodcast.com for social links so you can join the discussion.